It was a Friday evening in late spring, and the quiet neighborhood of Chestnut Grove basked in the warm, golden glow of a setting sun. Rachel and Connor Anderson's home stood at the end of a cul-de-sac, a sprawling suburban retreat, complete with a meticulously maintained lawn and a pristine white picket fence that seemed to embody the ideal American dream. However, as Connor would soon learn, perfection had a way of shattering into fragments sharper than broken glass. Rachel stood in the kitchen, her golden hair gleaming in the soft light as she leaned over her phone. She laughed, a soft, melodic sound, and quickly turned the screen away when Connor entered the room. He paused, noticing her startled reaction to his presence. "Who's that?" he asked, his tone casual yet curious. "Just Sarah," Rachel replied, referring to her closest friend since college. "She's planning a bachelorette party and wanted some advice. You know how she is." Connor nodded, though a flicker of unease stirred in his gut. He couldn't quite pinpoint the cause, but something about Rachel's tone seemed off. He dismissed the feeling, attributing it to the stress of his demanding week at work. Rachel was the love of his life, radiant, captivating, and full of charm. They had been married for 8 years, their bond always feeling unbreakable, or so he thought. That evening, Connor suggested they watch a movie together, but Rachel declined, claiming she had a headache. She retreated to their bedroom, leaving him alone with a bowl of popcorn and a growing sense of discomfort. After an hour of flipping through channels without paying attention, Connor decided to go for a drive to clear his mind. The streets of Chestnut Grove were eerily quiet as he drove aimlessly. Eventually, he found himself near a cozy cafe downtown, a place where he and Rachel had often spent lazy Sunday mornings together. He parked his car, ready to turn back, when he spotted something through the cafe's large glass windows that made his heart skip a beat. Rachel sat at a corner table, and she wasn't alone. A man with unruly dark hair and a relaxed smile leaned in close to her. Rachel was laughing, a carefree, uninhibited laugh Connor hadn't heard in months. When her hand brushed against the man's, a sharp pang struck Connor's chest. He remained in his car, frozen and unable to look away. His mind raced, grasping for explanations. Perhaps it was just a friend. Maybe it was innocent. But as the moments passed and their body language grew more intimate, Connor could no longer ignore what his eyes were witnessing. When Rachel's hand rested on the man's thigh and lingered there, Connor's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. He didn't confront her that night. Instead, he drove home in a daze, his thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief and anger. That sleepless night, he replayed the scene at the cafe over and over in his mind. By morning, he resolved to uncover the truth, a truth he couldn't deny without evidence. 2 days later, Rachel casually mentioned she was meeting Sarah to finalize plans for the bachelorette party. She kissed Connor on the cheek, her lips warm and reassuring, then left without hesitation. As soon as her car disappeared down the street, Connor sat down at her laptop, hoping to find a clue, an email, a message, or anything that would confirm his suspicions. Rachel had always been protective of her privacy, but Connor's persistence paid off. He stumbled upon a folder labeled vacation ideas. The first few photos were innocent, beaches, sunsets, and mountain cabins. But as he scrolled further, his breath caught. One image showed Rachel in a sleek black dress he didn't recognize, sitting at a bar he'd never been to. Beside her sat the man from the cafe, his arm draped casually around her shoulders. The final photo was the most damning. It showed Rachel and the man in a close embrace, their faces mere inches apart, as though ready to kiss. Connor slammed the laptop shut, his chest heaving with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. The evidence was undeniable. Rachel was having an affair, and the seemingly perfect life they had built together was unraveling before his eyes. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Connor sat alone in their dark living room, consumed by a storm of emotions. He didn't know what his next step would be, but one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. David possessed an effortless charm that naturally drew attention. Having recently relocated to Chestnut Grove, he opened a sleek new gym in the heart of downtown. Rachel had casually mentioned him a few times, referring to him as the striking newcomer who had joined her yoga class. At first, Connor hadn't given much thought to her remarks. Now, however, David's name was etched into his thoughts, a glaring reminder of everything slipping away. Connor couldn't escape the mental image of Rachel sharing a laugh with David, her hand resting just a little too long on his. The memory gnawed at him, fueling an intensifying storm of anger and betrayal within. As he revisited their recent interactions, fragments began to fit together like pieces of a cruel puzzle. Rachel's late nights, her newfound passion for fitness, and the mysterious yoga retreats she attended over the past months suddenly seemed far less innocent. The stage was set, and the players were in position. Connor could no longer deny the reality before him. The illusion of their perfect life was unraveling, and the hidden truths threatened to shatter it completely. His suspicions crystallized with harsh clarity the following Friday. Rachel mentioned she would be attending another yoga retreat for the weekend, a 2-day getaway she claimed would rejuvenate her. She kissed him goodbye with her suitcase in hand, flashing a serene smile that barely concealed the growing rift between them. As soon as Rachel left, Connor's determination solidified. This time, he would follow her. Rachel's car was easy to trail through the quiet streets of Chestnut Grove. However, instead of heading to the retreat center on the town's outskirts, she drove downtown to the upscale hotel district. Connor's chest tightened as he watched her pull into the Rosewood Suites parking lot, a luxury hotel famed for its private villas and exclusive clientele. Parking at a safe distance, Connor observed as Rachel stepped out of her car. Moments later, David Holloway emerged from a sleek black SUV. His commanding presence exuded confidence as he strode toward Rachel. Her face lit up with a genuine smile Connor hadn't seen in months. David wrapped his arm around her waist, and the two entered the hotel together. Connor sat frozen in his car, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The sight of Rachel with David seared into his mind, a vivid, painful confirmation of his fears. Anger and desperation coursed through him, pushing him toward a decision he could no longer avoid. He followed their path into the hotel, his pulse thundering in his ears. At the front desk, Connor feigned familiarity with Rachel's reservation, claiming he had lost his key. The receptionist hesitated, but eventually handed him a spare card. As Connor approached the suite, his stomach churned, each step heavier than the last. He paused at the door, hearing muffled laughter, a sound once comforting, now a cruel mockery. With trembling resolve, he swiped the key card and pushed the door open. The scene inside confirmed his worst fears. Rachel and David sat on the bed, their faces mere inches apart, their laughter evaporating the instant they saw him. Rachel's eyes widened in shock, her hand flying to her mouth. "Connor, I can explain," she stammered, but her voice faltered under the weight of the moment. David stood, his demeanor defensive yet unapologetic. Connor stared at them, his heart breaking beneath the crushing weight of betrayal. Without uttering a word, he turned and walked away, the image of Rachel and David imprinted on his mind like an indelible scar. Back in his car, the realization hit Connor like a tidal wave. There was no salvaging their relationship. The woman he had loved and trusted, the life they had built together, was gone. All that remained was the bitter truth and the unrelenting ache of betrayal. For 2 days, Connor wrestled with a maelstrom of emotions. His mind replayed the scene in the hotel suite relentlessly. The pain, anger, and sorrow consumed him, but amidst the chaos, a clear resolve emerged. He knew Rachel's deceit couldn't go unaddressed. When Rachel returned on Sunday evening, her demeanor was as composed as ever. She breezed through the door, her overnight bag in hand. Connor was waiting in the living room, his laptop open on the coffee table, displaying damning evidence. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cold and steady. Rachel froze as her eyes landed on the screen. Her face paled, and she set her bag down with trembling hands. "Connor, "I can explain," she began, her voice shaky. "Explain what?" Connor demanded, his voice rising. "That you've been lying to me for months? That you've been sneaking around with him behind my back?" Rachel's tears flowed freely as she clasped her hands together, desperation etched into every word. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it did, Rachel." Connor's voice cracked with emotion. "You destroyed everything we had." Rachel tried to reach for his hand, but he pulled away. "Please, Connor. I love you. I made a mistake, but we can fix this." Connor shook his head, his eyes brimming with hurt. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." Their conversation devolved into a heated argument, Rachel pleading for forgiveness, while Connor rejected her attempts to justify her actions. By the end of the night, the reality was clear. There was no going back. Their marriage was irreparably broken. As Connor packed a bag and left the house, Rachel was left sobbing on the couch. Yet for Connor, leaving wasn't the end. It was the start of a calculated journey toward closure.